Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Pitchwars Adult Mentor Chat. And that's mentors that are mentoring adult fiction and some memoir, not that the content of this chat is necessarily adult. So if you're stumbling upon this video and you don't know what Pitchwars is, let me just summarize that real quick. Pitchwars is an annual mentoring event where established writers and industry professionals mentor up-and-coming writers, and they do a full round of edits with them, and they also help them prepare their submission materials. The upcoming dates we have on September 11th, our mentor wish lists are going to go live, and that is how you choose who you're going to submit to. So make sure you tune in for that on September 11th. And then on September 25th is when submissions open, and they are open for 3 days. So you only have September 25th to 27th to submit. So make sure you get your stuff ready. If this is the first chat you've caught, you can go and check out all the previous chats by going to this link, bit.ly/pitchwarslive. You can also go to my playlist. That will actually take you to the playlist with all those chats on it. And that is also where you can find upcoming chats. So if you miss the ones in the future, you can go to that same link and you will be able to find them there. If you want to learn more about Pitchwars, make sure you go to pitchwars.org and read all the information there. We have all the basic rules and guidelines there. If you want to ask questions of our mentors tonight, make sure you do that on the YouTube page, because that's going to be the easiest way for us to see them. We do have tonight, Gladys Quinn is helping us out on Twitter. She's our Twitter captain for the evening. Our social media chair, Lee, is unavailable tonight, so Gladys is helping us out. And she will occasionally bring some questions over from Twitter onto YouTube so that we can catch those if that does happen. But that's going to be a bit of a delay. So make sure you click on through to YouTube and watch it on YouTube if you're watching this in Twitter right now. Let's see. Oh, our mentors tonight, because mentor wish lists do not go live until September 11th, they're not allowed to answer any questions about their wish list. So if we have any questions about that coming up, I'm just going to skip over them because that's a big no-no tonight. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Nicolas. I'm the managing director for 2019 for Pitchwars. I was a Pitchwars mentor from 2012 to 2017, and I was a social media director last year. And I'm the managing director this year. And I am a young adult author. I'm the author of Keeping Her Secret, among other things. And I think, yes, now we're ready to let the mentors introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tok Jan. I am a writer of noir suspense and gothic mysteries. I was a mentee back in 2017. I was a mentor last year, and I'm super excited to be back this year in the adult category.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Brown. I've been a mentor for, this is going to be my 4th year, and I'm an author of new adult and adult romances. I'm the author of, Signs of Attraction and Friends with Benefit Zone, and I've got an adult contemporary romance coming out this November, and some rom-coms coming out next year.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Carrie Callahan. Like Laura, this is my 4th year mentoring, but this year I'm doing it a little bit different. I am teaming up with the awesome Michelle Hawk, so I am representing both of us tonight on Pitchwars Live. I am an author of historical fiction with literary flavor. My debut last year was A Light of Her Own, and I've got another one coming out in January called Salt the Snow. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Garrett. I was a mentee way back in 2014, and I've been a mentor since 2015. And my Pitchwars novel in 2014 actually got me my agent. It actually was published, and it was published as Hollywood Homicide that came out in 2017. And the follow-up, Hollywood Ending, came out last year. And this is actually a Today Show Best Summer Reads pick, which is kind of really cool. So, and I write funny mysteries.
Hey, I'm Stephen Morgan. It's been a long time since I was an active author. Mostly I have been an editor for YA and a lot of adult romance over the last few years, but I also love literary, horror, thriller fiction. Last year, I was a mentor for YA. This year, I'm excited to be a mentor for adult.
Sorry, my mouse is sticking. There we go. Okay. So thank you all for joining us, and thanks. We have a couple people just saying hey in the comments. We don't have any questions yet, but it's okay because I have questions in case we don't get those for a couple of minutes. Jennifer says, good evening. Kara says, excited to be here. Brittany, I think Brittany's been on every mentor chat, so super excited she keeps coming
Hey,
back.
Brittany, welcome.
So excited. Yeah, so everyone's just saying hi right now, but if you guys have questions, go ahead and just drop them in the chat here, and I will start us off with a question. So whenever you are reading, I think, yes, everyone here has been a mentor before. I just want to, I was like, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay. Whenever you're reading through your submissions, what really grabs your attention? What makes you read more? Feel free to jump in, whoever wants to go.
For me, it's two things: high concept and the voice, right? Because I need to feel like the premise in itself is compelling. But then also, are you a great storyteller? You can have a great query, and then I open the book and I see the pages and I go, this is a great idea, but the storytelling may not quite be there. If it was going to be, if you were not going to, if you're going to have one or the other, I would say the storytelling, because the storytelling, I mean, we all know authors where if they were writing a grocery list, you would want to read it, right? So that's what it is for me.
Yeah, I immediately thought of voice before anything. I mean, I think that's what grabs you. It's the voice. And that's something that is, I think, very, it's like everybody has their own individual voice. So it's hard to really pin down what it is, but that voice just has to pop and, capture me. So that's what I look for first.
I agree. Definitely voice. I'm not as concerned with plot because I feel like one of my strong points is that I'm a really good plotter. So I feel like I could fix the plot. I feel like I don't want to try to change anyone's voice. So I kind of feel like either I'm going to like it or I'm not going to like it. So.
Okay. We're playing your turn, my turn over here. I agree with everyone else on the voice. That's really a way of whether or not I'm going to get drawn in. But I also really look for a compelling concept. I want something where I read that query, and even if it's, not the strongest, there's something that jumps off the page. There's something that says, this is different from anything out there, anything I've ever read before, whether it's concept or just a little bit of an idea. So that's what's really going to kind of draw me in, is that different, unique thing, and I want to see where the author goes with it.
So like Laura, I agree. One of the things that most catches my attention is an idea that I haven't heard before, whether it's a place or a particular set of stakes or a conflict that I haven't heard before. I'm actually not as interested in voice. I kind of don't like often really voicey stories. To me, that feels like trying a little bit too hard. This is all, I guess we should have said at the beginning, everything here is super subjective and there are no rules. These are just our own individual preferences. So for me, I'm looking primarily for a new idea that I haven't heard before. And then I don't want to be confused. The stories I'm looking for tend to have a lot of elements in play, and I need an author who can, at a basic level, sort of get things rolling in a way that doesn't lose the reader. If I'm lost in the first 2 pages, that means there's probably not a lot I can do to help that story along. So.
All right. So we have a similar question. Our first question is very similar. So I'm basically going to ask you all to answer half of it. So is there something in the first pages that will make or break it for you for choosing someone as a mentee? So you kind of talked already about what you like to see, but maybe something that might turn you off. Everyone's thinking very hard.
I'll jump in because it's kind of a continuation of what I just said. I don't want to be confused. And some of the things specifically that can confuse me are too many characters right at the beginning. I want to feel grounded in at least the initial protagonist or the main character point of view that we're entering in on the first page. If it's a family scene and there's 50 people in the first 3 pages and I'm lost, that tends to make me feel less caught by the story. And then another thing that will really turn me off is being boring. If every chapter starts with somebody wanting something, and if the desire that the point of view character has is so mundane that I don't care, then I'm going to move on.
I think for me, the thing that I need is to see that the author has a clear vision, that they understand the story that they want to tell, what the hook is about it, what, in as much as you can identify a kind of reader that this is going to have the biggest impact with and what you're doing to reach them. And if I see those sorts of things in the query, I'll certainly see them in the opening pages. To me, that speaks to your expertise as a storyteller and to have a clear vision. But if I start reading the first couple of pages and I just feel like the pacing is not there, the hook is not there, there's so much explanation and I'm waiting for the story to start. If I don't see that the writer is in control of the story, I will probably pull back because I just need to see that there is a good pacing to the story and that you understand what you're trying to do with it. If it seems like you don't, then I might have to take a closer look at it to see whether I'm equipped to help you get over whatever obstacle is preventing that from manifesting on the page. But in general, if I don't see that, it's going to prevent me from moving forward with the submission.
Do you want to go, Laura?
Oh, sure. Okay. I'm always playing the game here. For me, one of the things is if you read a query and you get an idea of a concept and then the first few pages have nothing to do with the query, oftentimes that's very, it's hard to figure out what's going on. Sometimes it might just be a simple case of the story isn't starting in the right spot and we move on. But other times it's an indication that some things might not right and maybe the concept isn't fully developed and ready to go. Beyond that, I do kind of agree with the other two of some of the features to look for.
I think for me, if I like the voice and I like the concept, I'm very forgiving. I do think sometimes if it's too much telling in the beginning, I think that concerns me a little bit. If you have a few typos, that's fine. But if you have typos every paragraph, I feel like I'm going to be working with you for 3 months, and I kind of want to make sure that there's certain things that you're going to be able to do. And, and I feel like you should, if you're not going to read, not the whole thing, but at least read the first chapter to make sure that there's not as many typos, things like that. But like I said, for the most part, not a lot is make or break for me. So.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has already said. I think that, like Kelly, I am a bit more forgiving. Like if I read a couple of pages and I'm not into it, I might just start skimming and then maybe even hop to, page 20 or whatever. But in a submission, I guess maybe page 9, just to see if maybe, the writer might be getting a late start in sometimes, when you're starting out, you kind of start the story a little bit later and that should be earlier. So there's not one thing that would be like, oh, this is going to make me, not want to read this unless it's something highly offensive or something is happening on page 1. But even then I would consult the query and, see what are we doing here. But yeah, I said it for what turns me on. And I guess that's the same thing that turns me off. It's voice. It has to hook and grab me with the writing voice and style.
I think for Carolyn, you and Kelly, that's a really great point. And I actually agree that I'm more forgiving than perhaps I describe myself as, because you're right. If it has a great premise if there's something in the query that makes me open that submission, I'm going to be very forgiving with those opening pages. There's unless it's like you said, something highly offensive, but otherwise, I understand that sometimes beginnings are hard, and that might be the thing that you need the most help with. But the rest of the book might be magnificent. So, like you said, sometimes, of course, I'm going to skip ahead a few chapters to the middle, see how you handle the ending, to get a much bigger sense in the first couple of pages. Because if the query was enough for me to open it, I'm not going to give up just because the first couple of pages are not what I see it needs.
I'm actually weird where I read the pages before I read the query letter, actually. So so I'll read the pages and then I'll look at the query letter and see if, like someone was saying earlier, that it matches. Because I feel like queries are really hard, and I think a lot of people, especially starting out, don't know how to write them. So I don't want to judge it based on the query. So.
All right. So if you see me looking off screen, it's because my cat is glaring at me, and I tweeted a picture of her if you want to see. But Jennifer, yeah, she's just glaring. Jennifer has a question. What are your thoughts on prologues? Do you consider them to be the first chapter, or is it better to skip it? I feel like we get this question every chat.
I'll go first. Sorry, Caroline. I feel like I'd rather see the first chapter. I think, especially in my genre, which I'm not going to say what it is, people will have a prologue that is not necessarily fitting what is happening in the beginning of the book. And so I'd rather, and even when I was in 2014, I had a prologue and I did not submit it. I submitted my first chapter, and my mentor, who was Sarah Henning, said that kind of basically like, I'm glad you didn't submit your prologue. And we ended up taking it out and incorporating it into the story. So.
I was just going to say, it depends on your prologue. Like some people have, kick-ass prologues, and then by all means put in your prologue. But yeah, if your prologue is something that maybe, and that's what your prologue should be, right? Ideally. That's why you hear all this controversy about, debut books, don't have a prologue. Well, no, not necessarily. If you have a prologue that is doing what it should, then ideally you would submit that. But that's the real, tricky bit, is deciding yourself if it's doing what it should. And if it's doing what it should, then I would think you should submit it. But if you're a little insecure and maybe, it doesn't set up things the way you think your chapter 1 might do a little bit more strongly, then you'd go with that.
Say the prologues that I've seen over the years and loved have almost always been very short and very punchy. They hook the reader really quickly with a question, a narrative question that then we are left wanting answered. And then the writer skillfully shifts to the first chapter, which is different, usually in point of view or in place or something like that, or time, than the prologue. And that's why, that writer needed a prologue, that, because it's different. It's not the same point of view character. It's not the same place. So I'm kind of ambivalent on prologues. I will say Michelle, my co-mentor, is, I think, less forgiving, maybe, or at least I will say less interested in prologues. So we're like, maybe negative.
One of the things with prologue, I would say, is really know whether your genre tends to have them. Because if you're writing a genre that you usually don't see prologues in, or it's a genre where people are like, oh no, don't use a genre, that's going to affect how we look at it. I know me personally, if I see a prologue, my first instinct is, okay, we've got to remove it. But I'm still going to read and see where it goes and then move on from there. But I've been kind of taught that you don't really need prologues. And I think also, as new starting out authors, your chance of getting picked up with that prologue staying in is probably very rare. But again, as others have said, if it works for your genre, if it works for your stories, keep it. Perhaps maybe share it after the fact if it's not in your initial submission, but be aware of what the market is for your book and if that prologue kind of has a chance.
That's a great answer. Well, I think for me, I'm highly forgiving with prologue. Because if you include one, I'm just going to assume that you are including it for a reason, that it is accomplishing something that it couldn't accomplish if it was instead chapter one, or had somehow else been integrated into the story. At the same time, I'll just tell you where I'm coming from. As has been mentioned, in a way, because prologues so often are not done well, they're done in a way that is extraneous to the story. And even if you begin in good faith thinking, yeah, this is here for a reason, it ends up at the end of the book, it feels like, why was that there? The story that started in chapter one. And that's happened so often that it's almost as though we've been trained to dislike prologues without giving them a shot. And that would be the only thing that I would caution the author about if they have one. Let's just consider that this is a risk that you don't necessarily have to take. But on the other hand, if it's a prologue that really is doing something vital for the story that couldn't otherwise be done, maybe that's a risk we should take.
All right. Anybody have anything? Okay. I just have to show y'all this comment. Your cat is so pretty. So there we go. She's playing right now. She's in a very playful mood. All right, back to the question and answer session. Cal asked, I don't know if someone mentioned this earlier or not, but what is the definition of contemporary horror? I don't know. Anyone?
For me, contemporary horror is something that is set modern time, real world, but has some sort of supernatural horror aspect added to it.
Okay. The next question, I think, might reveal some wish list stuff, so I'm going to have to skip over that. Also, we talked a lot about voice already, so how much will the presence of typos, grammatical errors affect your opinion of a submission?
Okay, I'll jump in here. If that's okay. Sorry. I think the main thing is we are doing this to be mentors. We know we're not getting something that's completely polished and ready to be published tomorrow. But at the same token, if you have a ton of errors, that kind of means it's not ready for this point. I mean, we're definitely going to go through and we're going to edit and we're going to alter. But if we're not even getting to the plot before we're having to really dig deep, then I'm going to repeat myself, but it's not quite ready to where it is. That being said, if I see some problems, that's not going to defer me if the meat of the package is there. So if we've got most of it, but we got to do some tweaking here, not a problem. But if it's all I can see is all of the errors, maybe it's not ready.
I think I kind of said this earlier, but if it's to the point of distracting me and taking me out of the story, then that's an issue. And the other thing is, I do line edits, but my strong suit is not grammatical copy edits. So if you need an editor who's strong with that, then the other thing too, I can't help you with that, and so that's something I do consider. So.
I see it as a factor of time. I think Kelly said this earlier, we only have 3 months to work with you, kind of less. And all of us, I suspect, are interested in working on big picture issues, characters and narrative arcs and things like that. If we have to spend the time doing lots of copy edits with you, it's probably, for me at least, it's just not as much fun. And we're volunteers and I want to have fun with you. And I think also it suggests that maybe we wouldn't get to do all the things that your manuscript would need, which is a disservice to the mentee.
For me, it just depends on what you're bringing to the table. Because I can imagine a manuscript where you have next to no command of the grammatical technicalities of the English language, and yet your concept and your storytelling, your insight into the characters and how to tell a story that no one else has told it like this before. If you have all those things, and the biggest hurdle we have to cross is me helping you clean up the manuscript, Of course, that's actually going to be the easiest thing in the world for us to do, you know. But in that sense, you know, that is not a deal breaker for me. If you bring so much else to the table, I could easily see that happening. But as others have mentioned, if the storytelling is not strong enough to break through a mountain of errors, that could be a big obstacle, because we'll have a limited amount of time. It's not that I wouldn't delight in working through that with somebody and coaching them through those skills as well. It's just that we have limited time to offer, and that's going to be part of the consideration.
Yeah, just to reiterate what others have said, it's typos take you out of the story. They trip you. Every time you hit a typo, you kind of trip. Now, if the story is great and everything's flowing and we get a little trip, not a big deal. You know, all manuscripts, you know, have typos. That's why copy editors exist. But if you're tripping every other line, then it's taking you out, you know, the reader keeps getting, you know, tossed out of the story, then yeah, that affects it. But hopefully when you're submitting, you've had another pair of eyes look over it, and you might have some typos, not a big deal, but it's not like every other line.
All right. Y'all are cracking me up. Okay. Brittany asks, that's where I'm at. Yes. Okay. Brittany asks, how important is voice in the query/synopsis? I've heard some say it's not as important to keep it simple, but I feel like I have a hard time not using voice, but then it gets too long.
I believe voice in a synopsis for me is a plus, but it is not required. It is most important to me that the query and the synopsis makes your pitch clear in the query, and the synopsis needs to take me through all of the important points of the story that you would want me to experience reading the manuscript. If you can do that with the same kind of voice that's part of your storytelling, great. But the most important thing is to have a clear synopsis and a clear story. But also, as you said, there's no need for it to be longer just to tell it in the voice. Again, if you are able to do that, I would delight for you to do that, but it's most important that you can just summarize the story.
So for me, I like to see voice in the query. I think that to me will give me a sense of what to expect in pages. Synopsis, not as much. I kind of, if I'm looking at the synopsis, at that point, I'm actually already in love with your story and your voice. And I just want to make sure that for my genre, that I'm not going to say what it is, that the plot points are there and that the ending works. So.
Well, I'm going to read everything. I'm going to look over everything regardless. So I will look at the query. I will look at the first pages. I will look at the synopsis. And I think that writing each is almost like a different skill set. So, you know, you can be really, really great at writing novels, not so great at pitching, and you could be atrocious at writing a synopsis. So I would say just have a goal to make sure that everything makes sense, that your pitch is there somewhere, that your synopsis is clear. That's what I would be looking for. So if you can get voice in there, I mean, amazing, great, bonus. But yeah, I think it's a different skill set, and not every awesome writer is capable of writing an awesome query, but that's something that you work with your mentor. So yay for trying to get into pitch wars, and we can straighten that out, right?
So one thing I've kind of always said, I really don't care how bad the synopsis is. A synopsis, especially a one-page synopsis, they are hard to do. And especially for this, you know, pitch wars, send me just whatever, get it on the page, get the beginning, middle, and end. You know, maybe others are going to want the voice, and I'm sorry. But for me, that's not as important as getting an idea of what the pages are like. And again, with the query, I'm going to help with the query. I'm going to help with the synopsis. So if those are weak right now, I'd much rather you putting your focus on getting your voice right in that first chapter in your manuscript. If you can get a query with voice, great. If you can get a synopsis with voice, that's great too. But if those aren't quite working, that's okay. That's not going to stop me. And again, the synopsises are evil. We all get that. Just, whatever you can manage, we can work from there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, when I was reading queries, I think the biggest mistake I saw in regards to voice inquiries was that when the voice was like opposite of what the book was. So the book would be like a serious or like scary book, and the query would be like funny, or vice versa. Yeah, definitely don't do that. All right. Kristen has a question. Hey everyone, evening. I have a question to ask all mentors. Would you auto-reject a manuscript if the word count is too high for the genre? And I've mentioned this in past chats, but I did want to mention it again. If you are unsure about the standard word counts for your genre, if you go to my website at sarahnicolas.com, on the sidebar, I have like a post on word counts for different genres and categories. So if you have no idea what the expected word count for your genre is, but it sounds like Kristen does, and she might be a little high.
So one year I had someone who had one that was basically double, was like within like the 150,000, and that was an auto reject just because I can't cut a whole book in 3 months. If it's within like 10,000, I can work with that, because I think usually with my mentees we pretty much do not a page one rewrite, but we do pretty close to that. So I'm not as concerned. But if it's like double or 30,000+, that to me also that was something I would not want to work with, honestly.
Well, it in many ways just depends on how many words we're talking about. If the average word count for your genre is like 70,000 and your submission is 130,000, I would just question whether you need to go back and make some decisions about where does this really fit in your genre? Does this need to be multiple books? So in general, it is going to be a big obstacle. Having said that, it hasn't been an obstacle for me with more than one book. One of my favorite books I ever worked on was Echoes by Alice Reed, and that book started off as 3 books. And we talked about, well, maybe we want this to be a standalone, and now it's a duology, but at least for the original story, it was all about this really needs to be a standalone, and she was willing and ready to turn those 3 books into one standalone great book. So it depends on also the strength of the premise, and is this perhaps better suited to be a shorter book, or with a large word count to be multiple books? I'll look at that. It's not a deal breaker, but those are the things I would be thinking about.
I'll just jump in and kind of echo a little bit of what Kelly said. I don't think 10,000 above or below is exactly my limit, but if you're within 20 or 30,000 of where you should be, I think we can still deal with that. But yeah, every year we tend to get some that you look at the word count and you go, oh boy, because you just know that sometimes when you have something that's big, it could be in the situation like Stephen said, that there's multiple books in there, but it also could mean that you've got one story that is going to need more than 3 months worth of work. So try and be in the range, but if you're over or under, we can still make some magic happen.
I will probably look at everything. But again, because we only have 3 months, if there was something that came in at 300,000 words, I would really swallow hard and probably not consider it too seriously. But you never know. There could be that story that's just, wow, it's got so much potential and it's so well written, and all the author needs is help paring it down. And maybe we would consider it. But I think both Michelle and I we will probably have a ceiling on what we're most likely to accept.
I think everyone already said it, so ditto. I'm not gonna. It's yes. I agree with everyone.
On the flip side, I will one of my mentees in I think 2016 had a really short book. I think it was like 55,000, 60,000, and that didn't bother me at all. So if it's obviously it has to be full-length novel. It can't be like a short story, a novella. But if you're at like 55,000, 60,000, that doesn't scare me. So.
All right, Stephen, I think everyone wants to know, do you have anything that is a deal breaker for you?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to say it all, because it all depends on what you bring to the table, you know, and what is your vision for this. I've just worked on too many books where it's something I would have thought would be a deal breaker for me was not, that it was an exception. And what a shame it would have been for me to miss out on that opportunity. Now, perhaps if the book was 400,000 words, I might say I'm just not equipped to handle this. This is like swallowing a whale. Uh-oh. Yeah, that's true. We have a private comment chat, and people are giving me some ribbing.
Everyone's saying Stephen is so nice.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, Hugh has a question that we can't answer personally, but I will answer in a general terms. Will any adult mentors consider literary/contemporary? Since I see a lot of genre, which I love too, does voice or genre matter more? So we do have mentors who will accept literary and also just like contemporary commercial fiction. They are not obviously the largest portion of our mentors because we base the genres that mentors take on previous year's submissions. So, but we do have at least 4 adult genre mentors who will be considering literary and commercial fiction. We made sure to have that. So, the person who asked me to pet my cat has a question. How important is it to drop right into action?
I would say that maybe the most consistent issue I come across in editing, it isn't necessarily that the story needs to start in the middle of the action. It's that the story starts essentially with the character waiting for something to happen. And that is not where I want someone to start the story. I want you to start the story with the character being proactive about something, some decision that is different than every decision they've made before. And that is what sets the story in motion. What I would caution against that I think that could be confused for is that you have to scale your stakes appropriately. Of course, you don't want to start at a 10 and leave yourself nowhere to go. But the stakes that would be appropriate and a goal that would be appropriate for the character to be proactive about from that first line lets me know that you're in control of the story, that it is going somewhere.
I like stories that start with a bit of character so that we're grounded in whose journey we're going to be participating in. But that introduction to the character happens right before a tipping point into some action. And in one of the manuscripts that I mentored in the past, it was literally the character was crouched at the edge of a river, and we got some of the information about her, and someone pushed her into the river, and then her journey began with that push into the river. And I think that's such a perfect metaphor for how no story ever has to start in the same way, but that is a particularly successful way of going about it.
Just to add on, I think action is almost like a relative term. And so we have to not think of action as like, high octane car chase. Action to me means something has to happen. So in that sense, yes, something has to happen in your opening pages. And what that is can be subtle or it can be loud, but something has to happen.
I don't need the action necessarily right away. I think some stories wait too long to get to the action at the start, and some stories jump into it too quickly. Like I read a story that starts off in a very high intense moment, and I didn't have any grounding into the characters at that point to really follow along and build that emotional connection. But either way, if the voice is there and there's something pulling me along, I can work with that. So that's really not an auto no or something that's going to immediately turn me off. It might start my notebook of, okay, here's where we might need to work. But I also see a lot of stories that there is an action right away and they can still work out. So I think you just got to think of what works best for your story. And then we can always, help from there.
Everyone get a chance to answer that wanted to? Kelly said she agrees with Stephen, so. All right, my camera kind of cut out for a couple seconds. Kira asks, do you read the query synopsis and first chapter of every submission, or just the query and see how you feel?
I kind of already answered this, but I start with pages first, and then from pages I read query. And again, because of my genre, I don't necessarily want to read the synopsis. Usually if I read the synopsis, it's after I've requested more pages and I'm maybe on the fence a little bit and I kind of want to see where the story is going. But I usually actually don't read the synopsis, although it's nice to have.
I kind of agree. I do not read most of the synopses. I'm sorry. But I want to see that query, and I always start with the query and then I read the pages. The synopsis is something I read when I need to get that quick, bigger picture, or I want to see how the author handled it. But maybe that's why I don't care about the voice in the synopsis as much.
I always start. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stephen.
You go ahead, Carrie. I'll wait.
Okay, turned her mic off.
That's the best kind of battle. So I might try out Kelly's method and looking at the submission for the manuscript first, because I generally do start with the query. I want to see what the pitch is, even though the query and then the synopsis are generally not a deal breaker. I usually go through the process of the query and then I look at the opening pages, because if I can see that you have a great idea and a great voice, then I want to look at the synopsis and get a quick glance at, does the story hold together from beginning to end? That tells me what can I expect if I want to read the whole manuscript. There might even be specific things within the synopsis that I'm waiting to see how you execute that, because I think this is going to be difficult. And if you pull it off, it'll be amazing.
I like to start with the query because without getting into wish list stuff, I'll just say that my inbox tends to be really broad and I often don't know where I'm going. And if I just start with the pages, I will tend to be confused. And so I need the query to ground me into just sort of what's going on generally. And then, so I start with the query, and no matter how I feel, unless it's like clearly just the way wrong genre, I will always go and read some of the sample pages, usually the whole thing, but not always. And then often from there, if I'm still confused and I want to know, well, okay, so the concept was great, the intro pages were a little bit confusing, but it has promise, where's this story going to go? Then I'll open the synopsis and see, does the writer have a sense of narrative structure, at least loosely, within the realm of what I can help with, and then decide whether or not to request more.
Yeah, I think I mentioned I look at all three. So I start with the query, and regardless of the query, I will always read the first pages. And then I may read the synopsis in full or just skim it, depending on, again, how much the query and the first pages grabbed me. But I will look at all three.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, good. We had two questions in a row that are kind of the same, very similar, and I'm going to post both of them up here, and then I'm going to make a comment, and then I'll let you guys say whatever you want to say. So Hillary asks, how do you feel about the new adult genre? Is it too new or niche a term to use? And then Tamara also asks, if your manuscript is more for an older YA reader, should you classify it as new adult? And I did want to say that we had discussed new adult at length in several of the previous chats. So I don't want to spend too much time on it tonight because we've had a lot of lengthy discussions about it. And also on the PitMad postmortem that I did with literary agent Caitlin Johnson, we also talked about new adult quite a bit then. So make sure you go back and look at those if you are interested in new adult. But I'm going to let our mentors answer these two questions.
I'm going to jump right in here because I am a new adult author. I've got 2 books out with Avon that happen to be new adult. And I got to be honest here, new adult is an indie field. If you're looking to be traditionally published, you are dealing with an uphill battle. I do kind of consider myself lucky that I got a new adult novel in, but my upcoming and my next books are not new adult, and that is a strategic reason. So I think if you've got a new adult novel, there is a conversation to be had on keeping it there or not, because your chance of selling it as a new adult are very, very small right now, and you don't want to have the battle be harder for you because you're going for a genre that the traditional publishers haven't quite figured out yet.
Also, I think to add on to that, I think you should know if what you're writing has new adults, because in my genre, which I will not say, that is not a thing. So it's just adult. So just make it adult.
Yeah, I don't really know what new adult is because it's not something I encounter by reading. And so I wouldn't know what to do. Stephen and I apparently are on the same wavelength. So we keep coming in at the same time. Sorry about that. And however, I will say that Michelle, my co-mentor, has said that she's open to working with people. But it's still, we would each it up.
Well, I guess I would just tell you how I see YA in an adult and why I will approach it a certain way. I'll be brief. It's that for me, young adult is about discovering who you are, and adult is about what happens after that. So it would depend to me, what is your character's journey? What questions are they asking? And then, as Laura pointed out first, new adult is a very hard to sell genre. So the question I would put to you is, depending on what kind of journey your character goes on, might it be better suited to market it at least toward adult or YA?
I just want to say, like, everyone's trolling Stephen in our private chat. I don't know how he's keeping a straight face. I mean, like, in a very loving, wonderful way. Yeah, so as the soul, well, not soul, because Stephen does young adult too, but as the young adult representative here, if you're saying if you're asking if older YA should be classified as new adult, if that's really a thing, then it's probably not young adult, because those deal with very different, like, life stages, you know. So okay, Becca asks, in your opinion, what makes a great first line? I'm going to listen to your answers very closely because I also want to know.
I once heard the description, it was an editor, and I can't remember who, that said, grab them by the eyeballs and don't let go. And that line stayed with me for years. And that's a great first line. It's something that's going to grab your eyeballs, your reader's eyeballs, and not let go. So there's no, I think, like, you can Google it and say, great first lines in literature, and find like a bunch that, people have sort of thought generally are great first lines, but it's something that's just going to hook, that's probably going to have some kind of leave the reader with a question that's sort of like a burning question, like I need to know more. And yeah, to me, that makes a great first line.
Anyone else? Everyone stumped?
Well, I just wanted to again pimp one of my favorite authors' books, right? And she's got a great first line. We are going to die. So for me, that line is like, okay, I could tell something important is happening and we're going somewhere. The author has made a decision that something important is happening in the story. But I guess for me, that also ties into one of the earlier questions, and Laura had a great answer. That really, it's not so much about like starting in the middle of the action. It's about like, well, where are we? Are we starting at an important moment in this character's story? And that doesn't necessarily need to be a car chase. It could be something that's totally internal.
So for me, it could just be anything that's kind of like a one-liner that's funny or ironic or a turn of phrase. It's just kind of something I think is cute and I admire. So
I am not really hung up over good first lines. I think they can do either one of two things, and I'm looking for either of these. Either that it does sort of hook you immediately, by maybe stating the unique circumstances or by hinting at the stakes. I'm going to read from one of the books I've recently read and liked. It's Underground Railroad. It says, the first time Caesar approached Cora about running north, she said no. So you know right there that there's going to be a second time. And you have the hint that that second time her answer will be different from now. But then there are other books, like, I'm not going to read you this one because it's long, but this is also an awesome book. And it's the first sentence is just a description of what one of the characters is doing. She's sitting on a rowing bench with the warp of her weaving tied to her belt, and the other end tied around a broken oar. It's a beautiful sentence, but you know, it doesn't necessarily grab you. It just sets the stage, and from there you glide right into the story. And those are both perfectly functional, wonderful.
Well, you came prepared. I wasn't prepared like that with 2 books.
I have a stack. I like homework. Watch out, people.
All right. Did everyone get a chance to answer the question that wanted to? I don't know if y'all noticed, my cat is like knocking things off and knocking my lamp over. So, oh, she just left. So hopefully this goes a little more smoothly from here on out. Okay, Kara has a question that I can answer with one word, so I'm just going to do that. If someone is chosen as a mentee by a team of 2 mentors, does that mentee get 2 sets of eyes on their work? Yes. Jennifer asked a question that we answered, so I just want to put it up here and say to rewind like 15, 20 minutes, and you will get that question answered. How much does word count affect your decisions on who you pick as a mentee? Okay, I think this is a question that can be answered pretty quickly. If we want to work on a series, should we query it when all of the manuscripts are finished, or can we do it after the first book is finished? Kelly like shook her head. She's ready.
I'm ready. So in my lovely books, these are obviously a series, and I write mysteries, and so I would not wait for all 3 or all how many to be done, because there's no guarantee that you'll get an agent off them or you'll sell them. So I would just write the first one, and then in your query you can say it has series potential in it. So
Same. I just, my observation for the market is that people have series fatigue, and a lot of that is for a lot of series that like they ended and they never lived up to their potential. Now so many have. I'm not pointing names at, so many people. I'm just saying sometimes they didn't. And so for me, the general strategy is you need a strong standalone, and if that does well, Then you come in with a second book that has a cliffhanger and makes people want to read the trilogy, or you know, whatever, or if it's going to be a series. But you've got to have, in my opinion, a strong standalone with series potential, not 3 books to start out of the gate that depend on each other.
If I could just add on series, I've received a number of submissions over the years that, you know, are either the first book in a series or say that they're part of a series, whether it's completed or not. What I am looking for is a book that will stand alone. If it can have another leap off after the end of it, that's fine, but I want to see a narrative arc. Maybe what we're going to work on is how we get your narrative arc to be complete. But I do think you'll be doing yourself a favor if you already have a complete narrative arc in this book. And then, you know, maybe there's one question that isn't yet resolved that can go into the next book. That said, I do have to put an asterisk there. My co-mentor might have a different perception because she has written a series. It's excellent. You should read it. And she might see that differently. So maybe tweet us if you have questions later once wish lists are out.
Can I add one thing, or do you mind? So I think for mysteries and mystery series, you should have a complete arc in your book. So that means that the killer should be discovered by the end of the book. So you want to just clarify that it should not be a cliffhanger ending if you're writing a mystery series.
All right, these animals are so active today. I don't know what's going on. Saturday night, I guess. Okay, we have a question from Graham. Hello, hi all, thanks for doing this. The social media blog presence tends to be something publishers are looking for these days. Is that something you consider when choosing a mentee?
I just want to jump in and say H******, no. I've had mentees who I didn't even know who they were. Like I did some serious internet sleuthing just to make sure that she was a real person. But I wasn't sure at all. She had no media presence. I wasn't sure what her gender was or anything. And it didn't matter. I loved her manuscript. I loved her query. I loved the interaction that we had when we were talking about it. That's all that mattered.
It's all about the writing. All about the writing. Doesn't matter, you know, if you have, you know, a platform or not. I do look, after I, you know, fall in love with the writing, I do look online to see if you're there. And that's just to do some, you know, checking to see that, you know, you're human and you're, you know, somewhat normal, although I do like weirdos, so that's okay too. But yeah, it's, you know, writing comes first.
I honestly wouldn't care. But I can see some things that I might find that would be a huge bonus or would be a red flag or deal breaker, you know. So if you have a social media or blog presence and you go into things just like, I'm not sure our PR team can contain this for your career, you know. But on the other hand, let's say you have a huge following and you are an expert at interacting with the people in the book community and within your genre. And it's easy to see that if you were to publish a book, there's a lot of inbuilt readership that'll transfer over. That's a huge plus. But ultimately, you've got to have a great book. And if you have a great book, then I don't care if you've never had a social media account or never had a blog or you don't even know how to make one. You know, that is always going to be secondary to, is the book great? Should it be published?
I think I've had 5 mentees, and I think only one of them ever did a Boost My Bio. I think some of them have been kind of active on the pitchwars hashtag, but not super active. I'm kind of like Caroline, where if I'm interested in you, I'm going to be stalking you. I'm going to be checking your likes. I'm going to be Googling you and all this stuff just to kind of see the type of person you are and to kind of see if that's someone that I think I gel well with. You know, want to spend 3 months kind of hanging out with and spending so much time together. So.
everyone else's comments reminded me of one other thing I like to say, which is that I actually don't really care about a mentee's book getting published. I really want it for them if that's what they want, but that's not why I'm here. I'm not here for publishing gold and glory. I'm here because I want to work with a writer. I want to help the writer learn. I want to learn myself in the process, and I want to develop a relationship that makes us both feel like we are contributing to the world of art. And that's what's most exciting to me. I really don't care beyond that. I feel like if we have learned and improved, then it's a success. Of course, if my mentees want to get an agent and want to get published, I am so here for them, and I am so ready to help. And Michelle, my co-mentor, is particularly motivated, or not motivated, but is particularly good at that. She has picked many successful writers over the years, but between the two of us, I think that I can say for both of us that, again, we are never going to be disappointed with someone if they don't get published. That's just not why we're doing this.
That was really sweet.
It was really sweet. And what I mean, it's true, because we can sometimes lose sight of that, as though everyone has the same publishing goal or is ready for the same opportunity. But I mean, you're right that somebody might have so much potential that I'm perfectly equipped to help them identify and develop. And maybe the next step for them is not to be published, but it is to help them see what the next step needs to be for them to become the kind of storyteller that they want to be.
Okay, so just in general, just FYI, we're not going to be answering any questions that like are, this is my genre, this is my word count, is that okay? I think we talked in general terms, and I think you need to figure kind of that out for yourself. Okay. Jennifer Long, we got a very similar question to this. I don't know if it was Jennifer before in another chat, but I know some genres have specific groups within the umbrella, like urban fantasy, high, epic. Does pinpointing your manuscript to a specific subgenre help or hinder submission? And I think last time everyone pretty much agreed, like, yes, you definitely need to determine between urban fantasy, high, and if you guys agree, just nod your head, and then we'll go to the next question. Yes, okay. Elise asks, I had a sensitivity read and it dramatically improved my manuscript. Should I address that in my query? If so, how?
I would just say, it's been read by, beta readers and sensitivity readers. I would just give it a line. I wouldn't do like super long thing about it.
And I'd want to know that if you've taken the extra step to do that, that's awesome. And you definitely should point it out.
Okay, yeah, I agree. My first reaction was going to be that I would assume you have done your due diligence, but I can now remember a couple of submissions where I was reading it and I was like, this is so good, but I'm praying you've done a sensitivity read, because I might not be the person, even as the editor, to offer that insight, that expertise. And I'm like, this is a very difficult subject. And it would actually give me some peace of mind for you to come out of the gate in your query saying, I have already done my due diligence.
Just to add, so last year, my mentee, she's a straight, cis, white woman, and her book dealt with a lot of gay men, and not just gay men in a town, a southern town. And so I was pretty clear with her, we were pretty clear with her, me and my co-mentor, Mia Manansala, that we wanted her to get a sensitivity reader before the showcase, and so and we were able to find her one, Philip Vernon, PJ Vernon, who's actually a mentor this year. So that's one thing that if you don't have one, I would want to make sure that we get one for you and that you're open to that. And if you're not open to that, honestly, that would be a deal breaker for me.
For me, this is going to be a conversation. So whether you've got it in your query or not, it's something I'm going to want to know before I consider moving forward. Because if it's not something that I have background on, I'm going to want to make sure that the author does, whether it's because of your own experiences or not. I'm going to want to know that there's not going to be something that I'm going to miss here that is really going to hurt the group that it's being referenced to. So prepare to have that conversation, because we might.
All right, so I think the mentors tonight are good with staying with a little bit longer than an hour. If y'all need to leave, just feel free to let me know and you can peace out. But we're not going to answer any of the questions that were asked after 9 p.m. So that is going to be our hard cutoff, just to FYI. Okay, Jennifer asks, how likely are you to turn down a submission if it has a cliche beginning? And I do want to mention, like, sometimes we use this language like turn down a submission, or sometimes we use the word rejection, and that's just not quite accurate for pitchwars because we don't turn down anything, but we can only pick one. And so oftentimes, just because something's not picked doesn't necessarily mean it's like rejected.
I always read beyond the beginning. Well, assuming we get 10 pages, so, and we get the query and we get the synopsis. So again, I'll be looking at all of it. So it all gets taken into consideration.
I would ask if the writer thought that the beginning was cliche, if there was anything they could do about it, unless it was a cliche that was intentionally deployed and they're intending to be ironic about it or something, in which case there should still probably be some clues in the intro that this is going to have a twist. Like, unfortunately, like Sarah was saying, there are only so many manuscripts that we can help. And so, everything that you can do beforehand to prepare, in some ways, that's also a benefit of the program, because you're forcing yourself to make those necessary changes and, be in a better place, whether or not a mentor is able to work with you. And so I would just take a hard look at that. That said, personally, if I thought an intro was weird, but I liked the concept, like Caroline said, I would skip further on and see what else there was.
I think for me, I kind of said this earlier, that it's not, the first chapter is not necessarily a deal breaker for me if I love certain other aspects of it. And when I request more pages, we always ask, what won't you change? And so I think that's a thing too. If you're like, I love my beginning and I definitely won't change it, and I think it needs to be changed, and that's obviously something I would not, I'd be like, okay, not this person. So I think it's how open you would be to changing it too. So.
For me, the cliche is never going to be a deal breaker. I mean, I wrote a couple of writing advice articles for my website that's all about, like, cliches are cliches for a reason. they work so well. But what I would be looking for is not, are you using a cliche? It's how much awareness do you have of why that has become a cliche, and how you can subvert our expectations and use that cliche in a fresh way. If that's what you're doing, then of course it's not a deal breaker. But if what you mean by cliche is, we have seen this done this exact same way over and over, that is going to be an issue. But if the rest of the book is not like that, okay, then maybe we just need a different beginning.
I'm kind of agreeing with what most people said. The cliches are not a deal breaker, but as Stephen was mentioning, if you come in with the main character looks in the mirror and describes herself, then that might be a flag that maybe you need a little more research, a little more work before going forward. But ultimately, cliches can work. Sometimes they don't. It's going to be the full package. It's not going to be, oh, well, there's a cliche here and I'm done. No, I'm going to want to see where we're going, because things can be changed.
I feel like all of you are way nicer than I am. Because I feel like if you're asking this question and you know that your first scene is cliched and you're worried about it that much, you might want to look into trying to rewrite it so that it is not that cliched. But That's the Slytherin talking. All right, next question. We have answered kind of this question, so I'm going to skip it. It's what inspires you to request more pages. We definitely talked about that at the very beginning. So okay. Sarah asks, if we are not selected by a mentor, what is another route to go get help with your manuscript if you're getting rejections but not getting feedback for why?
Oh, man, I applied to pitchwars 2 or 3 times. I can't remember. I was never picked as a mentee. So I'm all over this. The answer is you still need other people's help. And pitchwars really is just a fancy, gussied up critique partner program. We're just other writers like you all. We're just here to help. You can find other critique partners on the internet, on the pitchwars hashtag, at writing conferences. So what I did was I joined a writing group and I submitted my stuff to the writing group and I got it torn up, and I submitted again and I got it torn up, and I just kept getting slowly better and better. There is nothing like rejection and feedback for honing your craft. And I'm still going through that all the time. I'm still a part of that writing group and I still get critical feedback. So one of the things that breaks my heart about pitchwars is I love the program so much, but people do seem to put really a lot of weight on it. And like, you know, we're here for that and we're here to have fun, but you know, we're just people and you can find other people.
Pitchwars is just a fun alternative to querying. That's what I can describe it as. And I think that Carrie's correct, that sometimes people take it too serious and think it's like some magic carpet ride to fame and fortune. And so it's just a fun way to an alternative. So
something I want to say from a different perspective here, because I was recently in the query trenches and I noticed that from my first time around to my second time around, there was less and less feedback. And I know a lot of us, we value those little tidbits that an agent might give in their rejection that lets you know what you're missing and which way you're going. And I can really relate to people that are out there now that are getting less of that and feeling a little more lost. But as everyone said, that's where your critique partners come in. And you might have a great group, but maybe you need somebody else. And you got to listen to those feedback. You know, there's a rule there. If one person says something that you don't agree with, maybe that's just them. But if 3 people say it, there's your clue that maybe you got to start looking to that and maybe you need to start changing that up. So in this business, you got to rely on those peers. And it's not up to pitchwars. It's not up to an agent or an editor to help you get to where you need to be. You got to learn along the way. And just being on the Twitter hashtag and chatting with other people and learning things, those are great ways to kind of help you move forward on your own. And you need those other eyes as well.
I was just going to add that, yeah, I too did not get into pitch wars when I first tried, but there are so many other routes. You know, there's other contests, there's other online contests, there's perhaps other contests even like somewhere where you live locally. You can look for meetups locally or online things and find, you know, we tend to think of writers as introverts, but we're all out there, and you kind of just have to look, and then you will find other writers, and you just keep feeling it out until you find people that you kind of gel with and go from there. But, you know, don't put all your eggs in one pitch wars basket. You know, look what else is out there.
I think now is a good time to mention the Pitch Wars forum. So if you go to pitchwars.org and go to community, on the drop-down menu there, you can go to our forum, and there are critique forums in there. And that might be also not only a good way to get critique and eyes on your query, but also if you find someone you gel with, you might be able to find some critique partners there, which I know people do every year. So, okay, I missed the first question from Sarah Rose. I apologize. But I love it because I've never seen this question before in my 7 years of Pitch Wars, which is just a complete rarity. And this is a very easy one to answer. So I'm not even going to give you all the opportunity to answer this one, but I'm so excited to see a new question. Kind of an odd question, but if a mentor is represented by an agent we have already gotten a rejection from, should that discourage us from trying to get them as a mentor? And the answer is no. Yeah. All right. Oh, there was a question that wasn't a question. Sorry. Okay. Oh, we got another first line question. Okay, we can answer this. How much does the first line fit into your choice of a mentee?
I'm going to say that I've honestly never put that weight on it. I mean, I've had 5, no, 4 different mentees so far, and I can't tell you any of their first lines right off the top of my head. My memory's bad anyways, though, but I know the general concept. So that first line, if it's great, let's go for it, but it's all good.
I agree. I put no weight into it. I didn't realize it was such a big deal until today when people kept asking questions about it.
It's just a bonus. If you've got a great first line, that's like amazing. If you don't sweat it. Just keep going. Go for a great second line and a great third line and a great fourth line. That's what you want. A great overall package.
Well, I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but it's going to be a deal breaker for me. And absolutely no. They just make fun of me because nothing's a deal breaker for me. I'm willing to make an exception for anything.
Oh my God, for half a second I thought he was serious. Carrie had one more thing that she wanted to add about the if you're not getting any bites and you don't get a pitchwars mentor.
Thank you. I have so many things to say about this, but I'm just going to say one, which is that, give it time. Be gentle with yourself. Set a manuscript aside. If you can't figure out why it's working, why it's not working, or apparently not working, then maybe you are too close to the subject matter and you can't read it as sort of an ignorant reader would. So just set it aside and work on something else. And while you're working on something else, you're going to be learning and growing as a reader. You're going to be maybe reading craft books and going to writers' conferences or reading articles on writing. You're going to be reading Stephen's blog to get all his tips on how to be a really nice writer. You're going to be doing all of those things. And then 6 months or 6 years later, you can return to that manuscript if you still love it, which is another question. By the way, the one my book that got published was manuscript number 5. There's only one of those that's in the drawer that I still have any interest in working on, and that's totally fine. But so, at some point I will return to that because I still love it, and I will hopefully be a big enough writer to take on the project that, I wasn't big enough when I started it. So give yourself time.
Well, the thing that I would add is maybe comes more from how I see publishing in general. Because in my career, I've had some pretty high highs and some awful lows. I mean, I've had some experiences where I could not be more grateful for the opportunity and the success. And then dealing, sometimes with book bombing and wondering, do I need to reinvent myself and all this stuff? And what I've taken away from that is to see that what I'm doing now that's within my control is to just be a writer, to be an editor, and beyond that, to be ready for the opportunities that are in front of me. But more than that, I don't have any control over the outcome. Sometimes I'll have a book that's doing really well. What matters is, do I see myself as, is this my identity? Am I really a writer and am I just doing that? And sometimes things go really well and sometimes they don't. But I'm always learning and developing myself and seeing what is the next opportunity. And if I don't have one in front of me now, am I getting to know people? I can't tell you how grateful I am just for the people I've gotten to know. And some of those people are doing they're doing things that I cannot even imagine doing in their media industry. But when they started off, when I first met them, they weren't doing anything. You know, they were a struggling writer who barely didn't know anything about craft and storytelling, but look at them 10 years later and what they've accomplished because they stuck with it no matter what opportunity might have gone through or failed in front of them.
Okay. I was actually I was at a social media blogger conference today. They asked me to teach a session on book publishing. And I did want to, this is like totally unrelated, but they gave us these cool name badges that are wood burned. They have my Twitter name on them. They're magnets. But I was talking with another writer friend of mine, and we were talking about books that we had queried widely and then taken like a year away from. And when we went back and read them, the books that we thought were like so fantastic and when like we're really confused about why they didn't get picked up before, we're like, these were terrible books, you know? And just like that year of like distance from it made you realize maybe I learned a lot writing this book, and maybe that's what I need to get out of this book, you know? So Ebony asks, I think this is earlier to when we were talking about series, a reference to earlier. So a cliffhanger in book 1 is bad? Everyone's just nodding. Okay.
It's just so hard to sell that because now, I mean, it's different if you've been on the New York Times list a bunch of times. You know, the publisher is going to put a little bit of faith in the series and that readers are going to buy the second book. But especially if you're a debut author, it is so hard to sell that to the publisher because they have this question of what's going to happen if nobody wants the second book. And now a lot of people aren't going to want the first book because the story will never be finished. Or, you know, you're essentially selling 2 books at that point, or at least 2 books. It just makes it a lot harder to sell.
I will say this. So in my first book, Hollywood Homicide, it actually kind of ends a little bit on a cliffhanger, but it's not the main story. It's more her romance. And it's kind of like a fun, it's not even like a cliffhanger. It's just like a fun way to end it, like an oh crap moment at the end of it that has to do with her little love interest. So
I will add that I read Kelly's book and I was like, what? They're not together yet? What? So yeah, it worked, Kelly. Congratulations. But
it's a romance. So like, as long as you solve the crime, you know, which is because it's a mystery genre, you can leave the romance open.
Yeah, you can have like layers of plot. So the first thing is also be aware of your genre. I mean, there's some genres that you would never have a cliffhanger. And then in other times, you always need to, you know, resolve your main conflict, your main thing. I would not leave as a cliffhanger. But if you have, you know, subtle layers like Kelly did, and then you leave that works. So.
Yeah, I would say exactly that if you're going to have, it's not that you can't have some cliffhanger, some big hook to get the reader to want the next book. As long as there is a sense of resolution that you have told a complete story. And then, yeah, you can have some sort of twist or cliffhanger. The thing that I would consider the deal breaker is if the story ends in a way where you have to buy the second book just to see what happens, you know, whether the story is resolved at all. And I feel very strongly about that. I know that sounds harsh, everyone. But I've to be in all seriousness, it's because I've learned that the hard way with a couple of books, that if it doesn't have that sense of resolution, the cliffhanger is not going to convince anyone to want to pick up the second book.
Kelly, I thought we had talked about whenever you mention your title, you should say the multiple award-winning Hollywood Homicide.
that is correct. If you see on the bottom, it's won an Agatha, an Anthony, and a Lefty, and an Ippy Award. Thank you. Thank you very
much. Okay. Ooh. Okay. David asks, I've gotten very positive feedback from beta readers on my manuscript, but I know it needs certain changes. Does that mean I shouldn't submit it for pitchwars?
Just roll the dice. Let's go. I mean, if you think that the book doesn't have to be perfect and ready for publication. If this is the furthest you can take the book on your own, then submit it to someone. If you need some help, let's see if we are equipped to help you take the book and your storytelling to the next level.
In the vein of, again, like not taking pitch wars too seriously, I would suggest totally submit it. And if you have an idea for how you can fix it as well, feel free to work on that, while the submission period is ongoing. Of course, as people reading submissions, we want to see the absolute best that you can send us. And we would love it to be like, as Stephen said, sort of that the manuscript has hit that wall where the writer can really do no more and just needs that other person's hand to pull them over the wall. But if you hit the submit button and then you find a ladder to crawl up that wall, go for it. Don't let us stop you while you're waiting.
I would say that, I've had conversations with people in the past, I'm interested in the story, and then you ask a little bit more and you find out, okay, so they've already got revision ideas. At that point, I might be seeing if those revision ideas kind of line up with what you're thinking, and then you can kind of go from there. But on the other hand, if there's two different ways this can go. It can be you've got a story and it's kind of solid, but now you've got some great ideas to take it to that next level. Or you've got a story that needs those ideas to make it solid. In that case, I wouldn't say not enter it in, because you can still find someone that's going to fall in love with it and want to take that journey. Just understand you might have a bit of a hot mess. And there's certainly been hot messes that have made it through before. So that's not necessarily the end game here. But it's acknowledging where your story is at and how that's going to affect going forward. Because at the end of the day, can you make those revisions in 3 months? That's what we need.
All right, everyone get a chance to answer if that wanted to. Okay, I'm super proud of the mentors on this chat. I taught them how to put emojis in on the computer. So if you're watching at home and you want to know how to do it, you hit the Windows key and hold it, and then hit the period key, and a window should pop up with emojis. So
wait, that's in general or just for this?
Just in general, like anytime, yeah, you're on the computer.
That's life-changing, guys. Watch out. Watch out.
Yeah, you can do that in the real world. Follow those command prompts. Manifest an emoji.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. So you're welcome. This millennial taught you something today. All right. So we have hit the 9 o'clock question threshold. So a couple comments I just wanted to share with everyone. Thank you. These chats are so helpful and I love them. Laura, your sparkly background is so flattering. Let's see. We have thanks for all the thoughtful info. Ebony thinks that your joke about it being a deal breaker was not funny, Stephen.
Oh man, you really hurt my feelings. I'm sorry.
No, she's joking. She knows how to use crying emojis.
That's the new joke. It's even funnier if you pretend like it wasn't funny.
Oh my God, everyone's really excited about the emojis. All right, so I'm gonna switch the screen over in just a minute to our upcoming mentor chats and also Ask Mentor chats, which take place on Twitter while everyone else gets logged off. Thank you, all the mentors, for joining us. And I have a couple notes at the end, so make sure you stick around and listen through the end. And I will switch this screen in just 1 second because it's on the wrong thing right now. Okay, technical difficulties. Thank y'all. All right, so thank you for joining us tonight for the Adult Mentor Chat. On the screen right now is some of our upcoming chats, both video and Twitter. So make sure you tune in for those. Again, if you missed any of the previous chats and you want to go back and watch those, or in the future, all the future chats are going to be available at this link right here, bit.ly/pitchwarslive. That's a YouTube playlist for all the mentor video chats. Also, on Thursday, we had a Pit Mad post-mortem with a literary agent where we talked about the different things that happen in Pit Mad. So if you want to check that out, you can just go to my channel, and that was on Thursday. So you can find that video pretty easily. Let's see. Oh, let's see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. The mentor wish lists go live on September 11th. So keep an eye on Twitter and pitchwars.org, and we're going to have a link to that. And that is how you figure out which mentors you want to submit to. And then Pitchwars submissions open September 25th. So that's when you're going to be able to submit. So that's an important date. It's also the day after my birthday. So happy birthday to me. I think that's it. That's all the announcements I wanted to make. I do have a new project that I'm working on that Stephen and Kelly have been helping me brainstorm a little bit. I'm not ready to announce exactly what it is, but I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel, because I'm going to have some really great video stuff coming up in October, and I hope you will join us for that. So thank y'all. Have a good night. Thanks for joining us. Good luck in Pitch Wars, and make sure you check out the future chats, video, and Twitter. I did want to mention, even if there's a chat that's not necessarily in your category that you're writing, you can still check it out. And obviously, as you can tell from today, you still get a lot of great writing advice, even if it's not necessarily about the category that you're writing in. So even if you're writing middle grade, young adult, whatever, you can tune into all the other chats. And have a good night. Thank y'all.